Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So today, as you may see, the theme is the interplay of masculine and feminine, embracing the paradox. So, fancy title. We will explore this in further detail. So, really exploring one of the oldest and most misunderstood dynamics, the interplay of masculine and feminine energies, and why this relationship is fundamentally paradoxical. This is a threshold where language thins and meaning breathes. This is when opposites do not argue, they converse. Here strength learns to kneel and tenderness learns to stand. Today we explore the ancient dance of masculine and feminine, not as genders confined to bodies, but as currents moving through every soul, every story, and every star. This is not about choosing sides. It is an invitation to hold two truths at once, to discover that this paradox is not a problem to be solved, but a wisdom to be absorbed. So I'm going to show you a little video now, somebody which I've taken a lot of spiritual guidance, I suppose. He's written some good books, and he explains this interplay of masculine and feminine a little bit quite well, I think. So let's see.
Now, as you might have guessed, I have a bit more yin than yang. This does not mean I'm going to burst into your lady's bathroom. Another thing to be aware of, that's all part of it, is the yin and yang in every human being. The movement, the polarity manifests in every human being of the feminine and the masculine. And again, it's important to be not to stray too much to one extreme or too much to the other extreme. Nothing in excess. But there's no human being who's totally in the middle. And if you're a man, it does not necessarily mean that you energetically have more yang than yin. There are men who have more yin than some women. There are some women who have more yang than a man. Now, as you might have guessed, I have a bit more yin than yang. This does not mean I'm going to burst into your lady's bathroom and claim my right to use it. And if you become aggressive with me and say, get out of my bathroom, I can say, I have more yin than you. And the fact that you are aggressive towards me proves it. You should be in the yang bathroom. Michael, our Swedish organizer, who just spoke to you just now, yin or yang? He has even more yin than me. That's why he's so lovable. But don't go too far with your yin. You have countries too that have predominant, are more yin or yang. In the United States, you have states that can be, in the collective energy field, either more yin or yang. A typical example, or for example, on the whole, doesn't mean that every individual in that state corresponds to that, but on the whole, well, probably most people would agree that California is more yin, Texas is more yang. So if your car breaks down in the middle of the night and your cell phone doesn't work, you have to knock at the door. And if it's an extreme yang household, the door will open with a guy with a gun. What do you want? Get off my property.
I'll stop it there. I could play the whole thing, but I think you get the picture. Yeah, so we can think of masculine and feminine as energies that we know, male and female, or we can see it as part of something as energies, and so it can attribute that to different, not only just different people, different countries, different items, different things, and so the yin and the yang does that quite nicely. So the yang being more masculine and the yin being more feminine. So yang being strong and feminine being nurturing. So they have the different energies. So I like the way that sort of explanation goes. But we all try and fit ourselves into a certain box in that respect. But as we'll find out as we go through this, it's not quite as straightforward as that. So we live in a world obsessed with categories, male and female, strong or soft, logic or emotion, active or receptive. But what if I told you that the very act of separating these qualities into opposing camps is what creates the paradox? The masculine and feminine doesn't exist in opposition, they exist in conversation, in dance, in mutual creation. So consider water and stone. Water seems passive, flowing, receptive, qualities we've historically coded as feminine. Stone seems solid, unmovable, dominant, coded as masculine. But watch the water over time, and it shapes the stone, penetrates it, transforms it. The stone, meanwhile, gives the water form, creates the riverbed, and defines the waterfall. Which one is truly active, and which one is truly passive? The question itself reveals the inadequacy of our categories. We quite often see rivers coursing their way through the landscape, creating its way, flowing from around corners, and wherever it creates as an obstacle, it goes round it, or sometimes through it, until it reaches the sea. So, and the sea can be very strong and very powerful. So it changes in its quality quite often. So the first paradox, strength through yielding. In traditional Chinese philosophy, the Tao Te Ching tells us that the soft overcomes the hard and the gentle overcomes the rigid. This is often presented as wisdom about feminine power, but it reveals something deeper. That what we call masculine strength and what we call feminine flexibility are not opposites, but complementary expressions of the same underlying force. Think about a tree in a storm. The rigid branch, proud, upright, seemingly strong, it breaks. The flexible branch, yielding, bending, seemingly weak, survives. But here's the paradox. The flexible branch survives precisely because it possesses a deeper kind of strength. The yielding is not weakness, it's strategic power. The masculine and feminine aren't trading places here, they're revealing that they were never separate to begin with. In human relationships, we see this constantly. The partner who insists on always being strong, in the traditional sense, never vulnerable, never yielding, always dominant, often creates brittleness. The relationship that thrives is one where both people can be strong and soft, leading and following, speaking and listening. The paradox is that true strength requires the willingness to be weak, and true power requires the willingness to surrender it. So the second paradox, creation requires both polarities. So in every act of creation involves both penetration and receptivity, both initiation and gestation, and both structure and flow. This is true whether we're talking about biological reproduction or artistic creation or the generation of new ideas. Consider the creative process. The masculine impulse might be the initial spark, the vision, the I will make this. But without the feminine capacity to sit with uncertainty, to nurture the idea through its awkwardness, awkward phases, to receive feedback and let the work evolve, creation remains sterile. Conversely, infinite receptivity without the masculine capacity to give form, to make decisions, to say this is not that, this produces nothing but potential that never actualizes. The paradox here is profound. Neither energy can create alone. Each contains a seed of the other. Every act of reception requires a courage to say yes. The sculptor, active, masculine, serves the stone, receptive, allowing its form to emerge. The stone, passive, feminine, demands the sculpture respond to its nature, shaping the artist's choice. Who is in charge? Both? Neither? The question dissolves. So creating a beautiful sculpture is not a case of being one or the other, or it's an interplay, a change, a fluid motion of going from one thing to another. The third paradox, each contains the other. Carl Jung wrote extensively about the anima and animus, the feminine aspect within the men and the masculine aspect within women. I think Jung didn't go far enough. It's not just that each person contains both energies, it's that each energy, when you look closely enough, is actually made of the other. What could be more masculine than competition, striving, and will to dominate? You observe elite athletes or business leaders at the height of their competitive powers. They speak of being in the flow, of surrendering to something larger than themselves, of the moment when trying to disappears and they become instruments of something beyond ego. They peak. Now, the peak of masculine achievement requires feminine surrender. And what could be more feminine than motherhood? Nurturing, protective care. Yet ask any mother about the fierce, even violent capacity that emerges when her child is threatened. The depths of feminine love contain warrior energy that would put any soldier to shame. The ultimate receptivity contains the ultimate assertion, this life will be protected. You see how that changes. We can all be fierce when we want to be, and we can all nurture if we want to. So the paradox, when you go deeply enough into either energy, you find the other waiting at the core. They're not opposites on a spectrum, they're two views of the same mountain, and at the summit, the views converge. So the fourth paradox, liberation through integration. So for centuries, cultures around the world have attempted to assign these energies strictly by biological sex, and the result has been suffering on all sides. Men have been told they must never be soft, never yield, never give up, and they've become brittle, disconnected, unable to access half of their humanity. And women have been told they must never be fierce, never initiate, never take space, and they've been diminished, denied access to their own power. So here's a paradox of liberation. Freedom doesn't come from rejecting these categories altogether, nor from rigidly enforcing them. It comes from recognizing that every human being is a dynamic interplay of both energies, and that health, an individual and collective, requires fluency in both languages. A person who can be both assertive and receptive, both structured and flowing, both fierce and gentle, depending on what the moment requires, this moment is not confused or contradictory, they're integrated, they're whole, and they contain the paradox rather than being torn apart by it. The liberation isn't about making men more feminine or women more masculine. It's about recognizing that these qualities never belonged exclusively to either sex in the first place. They're human qualities available to anyone who stops trying to resolve the paradox and starts living it. So the fifth paradox, polarity creates energy. So here's something that sounds contradictory, but is essential. Even as we recognize the artificial nature of the masculine-feminine binary, the polarity itself creates energy. Remove all distinctions and you get not harmony, but flatness. The spark happens in a space between, in the dynamic tension. So you basically can't have one without the other. Think about electricity. It requires both positive and negative poles. Remove either pole and you have no current. Music requires both sound and silence. Remove either and you have no melody. The masculine and feminine work the same way, not as fixed entities, but as dynamic polarities that create the energy of life itself. So the paradox, we must simultaneously hold that these categories are real enough to create energy and charge, yet not so real that we're trapped by them. They're useful fictions that point to something true. In relationships, this plays out as both the comfort of deep similarity and the excitement of difference. Partners who are too similar in their expressions of masculine and feminine energy often report feeling like roommates, safe, comfortable, but lacking spark. Partners who honour and even play with polarity often report feeling more alive, more creative, more engaged. Not because one person is locked into masculine and one into feminine, but because they can create polarity dynamically, dancing between energies rather than being frozen in them. So living the paradox. So what does it mean to live this paradox rather than trying to resolve it? First, it means developing comfort with contradiction. You can be both strong and vulnerable, both decisive and open to change, both boundaried and permeable. These aren't problems to fix, they're the human condition to embrace. Second, it means recognizing that context matters. The energy you need in the boardroom might differ from what you need in a meditation hall, in the protest march, or in the nursery. Fluency means being able to access different energies as situations require, not being locked into one mode. Third, it means honouring the paradox in others. When someone shows unexpected qualities, the tough person who cries, or the gentle person who roars, this isn't hypocrisy, it's wholeness. It's a paradox that made visible. And fourth, it means understanding that cultural expression of masculine and feminine are just that, cultural, not universal. What counts as masculine behaviour in one culture might be seen as feminine in another. The paradox exists beneath and beyond these surface expressions. Well, quite a lot to take in there. So the paradox of masculine and feminine isn't a problem to solve. It's the engine of creation itself. Every breath you take involves both expansion and contraction. Every heartbeat involves both contraction and relaxation, both pushing out and drawing in. You are, at this very moment, both holding on and letting go. The ancient symbol of the Tao shows this perfectly, as you can see by the circle on the screen there. The dark with the seed of light, and the light with the seed of dark. Neither exists without the other, eternally creating each other, eternally transforming into each other. This is not a static image of balance, but a dynamic portrait of becoming. We're not meant to resolve this paradox. We're meant to be it. Every one of us, both the mountain and the valley, both the question and the answer, and both the sword and the sheath. The music of human existence comes from honouring both melodies, playing both parts, and dancing between the poles rather than collapsing them into a single row. The paradox invites us into fullness. It says, you are larger than any category, and more complex than any binary, more capable than you've been told. You contain multitudes, and you can be both. You can be all. You can be the paradox itself, walking around in human form, creating and destroying and creating again. And that's the beauty of it. That's not confusion, that's not contradiction, that's life in all its beautiful, terrifying, and generative complexity. So I'm going to show you another video now, a little bit of science. So you might like this. It's telling you all about Newtonian fluids, or non-Newtonian fluids. I'll explain in a bit.
Not all liquids behave like this water, which pours exactly the same every single time. Some liquids change drastically depending on what we do to them. Go, Joe. Joe is running on top of a mixture of cornstarch and water. It's a liquid, but it acts like a solid when we apply force to it. If Joe stops moving, he'll sink right in. Stop, Joe.
Bye.
That is an example of a shear thickening liquid because it gets thicker when we apply force to it. In the kitchen, we deal with lots of shear thinning liquids, like these in front of me. I have mayonnaise, oyster sauce, mustard, hoisin, and ketchup. They go from a semi-solid to a liquid when we apply force. Well, let's check out this ketchup. When I turn the bottle upside down, nothing happens. When I tap on the side, it suddenly starts to flow. Because it changes based on outside force, you often end up with a lot more ketchup than you bargained for. So if you've ever struggled to get ketchup out of a glass bottle, remember to tap gently and just wait for it to thin. On the other hand, if you ever find yourself in a vat of cornstarch and water, keep running.
Thanks for watching America's Test Kitchen. What'd you think? Well, leave a comment.
I thought that was start from so there you have sort of a yin and yang, and a sort of a masculine and feminine all coming together there. A fluid which, when force is applied, becomes like a firm substance, and yet when you stop hammering away at it, it allows you to, it just yields and it allows you to pass through without obstruction. And that's like ourselves in a lot of ways. I know from myself in the past, and this is one of the reasons why I had some of the migraines once upon a time. With stress, you carry a lot of energy from work, through relationships, through life itself, and all the muscles start to contract, and all the blood can't flow because it's all getting constricted. And so you've got to be relaxed and then let that flow start, and then you're not carrying all this weight so much, and then the stress starts to fall away. But this is always easier said than done sometimes for a lot of people in the modern life. They carry this and suffer a lot in many different ways, because the body not only just gives you headaches, but over time stress will manifest in many different forms through the skin and such like. So emotions can be either of these categories, and stress carried around like this, like the fluid in the video, your body becomes solid. And being repeatedly under bombardment, always fending off attack, muscles getting tight. If you allow yourself to be still and let life wash over you, then you're able to move through the blocks that present themselves. You're able to move on. So it's a bit of a life lesson, not to be totally rigid all the time, but sometimes be soft and yielding when it needs. And then sometimes when life presents itself in a different way, sometimes you have to be more firm. So it is this interplay of masculine and feminine, of the yin and the yang. And this is always, it's never a static thing, it's always moving and always changing. And you must move and adapt with it if you want to create that balance in life. Oh, that's what I've learned anyway. Maybe we now think more about holding complexity without collapsing into fear. May we bless both the fire that moves us forward and the water that teaches us to yield. May we embody a strength that protects life and tenderness that tells the truth. And may the ancient dance of masculine and feminine within us give birth to something our fractured world is longing for. Not domination, not escape, but wholeness.